You are listening to Attractive Relationships, the podcast where we dive deep into the art and science of relationships and communication. I'm Rico Armstrong, your host and advocate for attractive, happy relationships. In a world where relationships play a crucial role in our personal and professional lives, understanding how to communicate to connect with others is essential. Transform your communication skills to increase your social status, your social confidence, and help you gain the best relationships you can have. Welcome to Attractive Relationships. How do you overcome depression and anxiety? What I have found is that when people are trying to become the best versions of themselves, they want the best relationships at work so they can make the most money, or you want to be the entrepreneur, or you want to find love in your relationships and have them more fulfilling and happy. One of the biggest things that stop people from accomplishing what they want at work or in their relationships is dealing with anxiety and depression. And that's something that I unfortunately have a lot of experience with. If you've listened to this podcast, like I grew up. Let me speak some words here. I grew up single child, no brothers, no sisters, nobody to really hang around with, also with a single parent household, with a father that at the time I had thought abandoned me. So it made me feel unwanted. And my mom died when I was 14. The only other family person I was related to that I was close with was my grandmother. She died when I was 18. I was molested by somebody I was supposed to be able to trust. My legal guardian stole my inheritance that my mother left for me that would have paid for my college, or for a house by the time I was 25. So I have grown up with plenty of reasons to feel unwanted, to have trust issues that all lead to different bouts of depression and anxieties. And I've been experiencing these things since a young age. And I've been very fortunate to have a lot of mentors, different mentors for different purposes that have helped me to overcome all the valid reasons to experience depression and anxiety. And if this is helpful for you, I want to share these things with you because what I do seem to notice with people who suffer through depression and anxiety is they're not always forthcoming, right? Because nobody wants just to say, "Hey, I'm depressed over here," like, because we want to feel valuable to whoever the group that we're talking to. We might be more open to saying how anxious we are, but even then is that seems like a burden to put on people. So we might be a little bit more cautious about how often we talk about our anxiety with others. And so what ends up happening as a result of not sharing, um, if we are depressed or anxious, is we end up isolating ourselves in one way, shape, or another, whether it's physical isolation where we just go home and never interact with people, which is a good reason why our relationships or lack thereof will suffer. It's a good reason why our relationships with people at work that can help to make us more money, or your dreams to be that entrepreneur, why that stops right then and there, because we isolate ourselves. And then usually by fact of isolating ourselves, what ends up happening is that it just deepens those negative feelings that come along with depression and anxiety. And then the deeper those feelings go, we end up finding a companion of some sort. It's usually some sort of vice, whether it's a porn addiction, or whether it's addicted to alcohol or to drugs. And then we just become more frustrated. We feel more lonely, and it's just this really downward spiral that's easy to get into. And so, what do we do? What do we do? There's got to be a better way to be able to handle depression and anxiety. And now, if you're like, well, Rico, this is attractive relationships. Why are we talking about this on this episode and this podcast? And there's two reasons why. One, attractive relationships is not just about the romantic, and it's not just about the relationships that you have with other people. It's also about the relationship that you have with yourself. Self-esteem is how you esteem yourself. Describing that kind of relationship that you have with yourself is very, very important. And if your self-esteem or how you esteem yourself or value yourself is diminished because of dealing with depression and anxiety, we want to address that, because when you do that, you are then no longer going to be as easily isolating yourself and saying that it's self-care. You're not going to isolate yourself saying, I need to recharge, but really it's just sending you in that downward spiral. But instead, if you esteem yourself more and can overcome that depression and anxiety, you can be more attractive for the relationships that you want. That's going to help you make the more money or help you to find the love that you're looking for. And that's why we're going to talk about how to overcome that depression and anxiety. And what I have found between my own experience and looking at the experience of other people and a ton of books that I've read, I've been to therapy, I've talked to other people who suffered, and what I've discovered is that there's basically three things that um, affect your depression or anxiety. And we might call these three pillars. If you have at least two of these pillars functioning well, chances are you're able to overcome the stress and anxiety that happens. But if two or more are missing, that's when we get into this downward spiral. Um, Before I give you those three things, I would like to say real quick, and I, I would love to reframe how we think about stress and anxiety and depression, particularly anxiety. Now, depression is one thing, but when we have anxiety, and the way I describe the difference is depression is hopelessness plus loneliness, and anxiety is overwhelm plus loneliness. All right. So when you're depressed, you feel alone and you feel like nobody understands you and you feel like you don't have options to help you with whatever the situation is. But when you're anxious, if you have anxiety, you might feel like you have too many options and you just don't know where to go. And you feel like nobody can really help you decide how to sort through those options. And it feels lonely. And what I would like to say to that, and this is hopefully encouraging, something that I found is that when I have felt anxious and even certain times when I felt depressed, when I figured out how to move past that anxiety or depression, was almost immediately a better, stronger version of myself. And this is what I really hope for you. If you're in that anxious, depressive mode, that maybe realizing, and maybe you can think back even to the past, that whenever something made you really anxious or depressed and you found a way to get through it, the other side of that was a better version of you that made you more successful in relationships, that made you more successful at work, that gave you clarity on direction on which to go, that gave you that enthusiasm for life. And this situation or the next situation will be no different. So here's the framework that has helped me and others to deal with depression and anxiety for life so we can have a better self-esteem that's healthy for us and allowing us to have the careers we want, allowing us to have the relationships that we want. The three pillars. Purpose is number one, relationships is number two, and your fitness and health is number three. Now let's talk about the easiest part of that to understand, and then we'll eventually end on purpose, which is arguably the hardest to really grasp, but the most worth it because it puts everything else into alignment. Hey guys, real quick, I'd love to connect with you beyond these episodes, which is why I'm excited to tell you that Attractive Relationships recently started an exclusive newsletter just for you. You'll get behind the scenes stories and additional exclusive content to aid in building your personal attractive relationships. So if you'd like to be kept in the loop, simply click the link in the description below the episode. Fitness and health, as you guys may know, and if you don't know, I'll tell you now, I used to be a fitness instructor. I still am, to some degree, and I coached over 6,000 group classes. I coached hundreds of one-on-one sessions with people. And what the reason why fitness was an important part of my life was not just because it was my career, but it was a solution that helped me to overcome depression and anxiety at a certain point in my life. I would just remember being fat and overweight, and I'm thinking, this sucks. I'd like to not be this way. It was harder to breathe. It was harder to walk around, and I just did not esteem myself very much for both my appearance and how I was able to move. And it took years for me to figure out how to eat better, how to work out in the way that I can be consistent in. And once I figured that out, I thought, I want everybody to feel this way. And that's the reason why I got into fitness. What I would later discover is that, again, fitness and health and figuring those things out was part of the solution to help me overcome depression and anxiety. And it turns out I wasn't the only one. As I coached hundreds more and thousands more classes over my career, a lot of people would come in and they say, I'm here because I want to lose weight, or I'm here because I'm going to a wedding. But ultimately, when I really started to talk to people, what they were really there for was to build their self-esteem. What they were really there for was to be able to overcome their stress and depression in life. They felt lonely. And what helped people to stick with that routine was a sense of community, because they didn't feel alone like they may have felt in other places in their life. And their fitness and health and what they ate and what they did transferred to how they were able to move through the rest of their day and the rest of their life. So it makes sense that fitness and health is going to really help you. And especially if you're training to, not just working out just to burn calories, but if you are training for something, this is a little secret caveat that I've learned. Train to run a faster mile, train to be stronger than you are today and be able to measure that. And if you do that, what you're also training is the capacity that you have to handle stress, because the body does not know the difference between physical stress or the emotional mental stress. It receives it a lot the same way. And so the stress of lifting something heavy, or the stress to kind of force yourself to run faster for that mile or to run longer for your first mile, the brain remembers that. And the brain says, man, I was under all this stress, but I was successful. And that transfers over to other parts of your life. So that's pillar one. Pillar number two is the relationships that you have. I'm going to talk briefly about this because this really is going to tie into the third pillar, which is purpose. But the relationships that you have should be encouraging to you. They should make you feel energized. And so sometimes when we don't feel energized by the people we're around, we will tend to isolate ourselves. And so if you feel anxious and you feel depressed and you're looking at the three pillars and you're like, okay, I'm still consistent with my health and my diet, check. But you go to relationships and you're like, man, every time I come home, my husband, my wife, my significant other makes me feel terrible. And all they do is tell me what I'm doing wrong. Or if you go to work and it's the same thing, the relationships that you have with people at work, people are just talking negative and they're just complaining about life. And those things have an effect. And so it's not a terrible idea to find people who are going to be more positive, who are going to kind of gas you up in a good way, to talk about your good qualities, to encourage you to do the things that you really want to do in life. And that's what I'm going to pause there with the relationships. And we're going to move over to the third pillar, which is purpose. And this is how purpose and relationships are really in alignment. Because if you really understand not just your goals, which have an end date or an end function, but if you understand your purpose, which is the thing that lights you up every single day, that doesn't have an end, that doesn't have an end function, like I'm getting a degree, or I'm going to run my first mile, or I'm going to get this job, right? Your purpose is something that goes beyond that, that never ends. If you create this life that is aligned with your purpose, it will be so much easier to attract the right kind of people in your relationships. So, for example, maybe it is your purpose to really want to help people in life. But then the job that you go to is their whole purpose is just to make money for the business. And so every day you go to work and you're like, I hate my job. And that kind of stress leads to the anxiety, because now you're like, I hate my job because it doesn't align with who I am and my purpose. My manager and how they do things don't align with me. And now you're like, well, what options do I have? Well, I could quit this job. I could find another job. I can do a host of other jobs, but I don't want, but then it's like, well, how do I do that? How do I juggle the bills in the meantime? Right. And then if you go home and then your partner is like, you can't quit your job. I'm not going to support you quitting your job. I'm not really supporting you looking for another job because we need your income for this, that, and the other. That's hard to deal with. But if you know what your purpose is and you're like, okay, I hate my job, I need options. And if you have the right relationships with your friends or significant others, so when you go home or you go to your happy hour and you talk to your friend, you talk to your significant other, and they kind of gas you up and they encourage you, they workshop and they brainstorm with you. Can you imagine the difference in how that feels compared to somebody who's always discouraging you? And this is how purpose and relationships work together. All comes full circle now on this attractive relationships podcast, doesn't it? When you are aligned with your purpose, what I find is that people's self-esteem rises sky high. And when you are doing things that are aligned with whatever your purpose is, you start to attract better relationships with better people, both romantically, but at work. If you're trying to start the business, you'll attract the clients that you want. Everything starts getting easier. And you know what else gets easier is because you're so much more happy with what you're doing and who you're doing it with. It becomes easier to want to go to the gym and challenge yourself more, to train yourself to build your capacity to do more. And this trifecta of things is how we overcome depression and anxiety. Take care of your health, train your capacity to do better. That's your fitness and health. Find your purpose and align your work and your actions with whatever your purpose is in life. And you will attract the right kind of people that will help you to do just that. Now, it may sound simple as I say it here, as we're concluding this episode. I am considering creating a course that goes into the deeper parts of the framework. How do you find your purpose? And how do you know if you found the right purpose? How do you attract the relationships once you find your purpose? And how do you work out? I'm considering doing a course on all of that. And if that is something that you think would be interesting or helpful to you or somebody that you know, uh, please send me a DM, or you can reach out to me on Instagram, Coach Rico Strong on Instagram or TikTok. Send me a DM, and you can DM the word purpose. DM the word purpose. And then I'll know that you've listened to this episode and that you're looking to maybe have a little bit more help and in-depth information on this topic. But that is it for now. Appreciate you listening to this part of the Attractive Relationships podcast. We'll see you next time. As we come to the end of another episode of Attractive Relationships, I want to express my gratitude to you for tuning in. Your support really does mean the world to me. Now, if this episode brought you any value, I would truly appreciate it if you shared this podcast with anyone that you think could benefit from our discussions on effective communication and relationship building. Until next time, remember, great relationships start with great communication. So stay curious, stay compassionate, and keep building those attractive relationships.